Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our readers and listeners of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Todd W., Jackie A., and Mike P. Tony Reda is on the show today. Tony is president and CEO of Tectonic Metals, a gold exploration company with assets and focus in Alaska, United States. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol TECT. Tony, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me. I look forward to speaking with you.
Well, Tony, I suspect most of our audience doesn't know who you are. So can you tell us about your background and what attracts you to the natural resource sector?
So my attraction to the mineral sector started actually at the age of 21. I was at a bar in Vancouver and I met an individual that started talking to me about an investment opportunity. So that night, when I was 21, that was, oh my God, that was probably 1995, if I'm not mistaken. And I made an investment and I actually made a bit of money, which is not always the easiest thing to do in the mining sector. So that investment kind of got my interest going, and I sort of jumped all in and started investing in stocks right through till Bre-X, which was 1997. Obviously, that didn't end too well. And I was the catalyst for the collapse of the Vancouver Stock Exchange at that time. Fast forward to 2005, I was a university student. I was also working for my father. He was a successful entrepreneur. We had several businesses on the go, but I kind of was looking for something different, and my investments kind of faded as I entered into university. And I decided to start looking at the junior mining sector. And in 2005, I sat down with the chairman of a company called Kaminak Gold Corporation. And we hit it off. I also met with one of the directors and another employee of the company, another vice president of this group of companies. And they, after a lengthy four-person interview and a task that they assigned to me as part of a sort of a homework due diligence, I was hired by the company. So in 2005, I joined as investor relations, and Kaminak Gold Corporation is basically we were literally a kind of a shell, if you will, in many ways, but we were probably about a $3 million company. And I was the second hire. The first hire was a gentleman by the name of Rob Carpenter, who became the CEO of Kaminak. And there was a third hire, our chief geologist, Craig Finnegan, and off we went. And we basically started out as prospect generator. And fast forward to 2015, we ended up selling that company for $520 million. We delineated 5 million ounces and basically put this project, the Coffee Gold project, into the permitting phase, and that's when we were acquired by Goldcorp. It wasn't just us. Obviously, the team evolved dramatically, and the appointment of Eira Thomas as CEO in 2013 really catapulted the company to sort of another level. So that's kind of how a bit of background and what got me interested. It was a pesky little investment in a junior mining company, and it really just highlighted just how much I love this industry.
Well, very well. And it sounds like you've had one success. And is there any other stuff that you've done since starting Tectonic, or are you pretty clean on your slate of past successes and failures?
Not speaking to the investments, I'm just saying Kaminak was actually my first mining mineral exploration company I've ever worked for. So I'm one for one, I guess you might say. And there were other successes within Kaminak that that's perhaps another conversation, but coffee was definitely the big win, the Coffee Gold project, that is.
Right. Well, tell us your thoughts on the gold market, Tony, and what do you see occurring in the market over the next few years?
Well, there's two sides to the gold mark. Obviously, gold is looked at as a currency, as well as like a storage of wealth. And there's also the supply and demand side, where the major mining companies, every day they produce an ounce of gold, they're actually depleting the reserves, so they need to find more. So from that, if we look at the supply and demand side, I see that continuing to grow. Mining is becoming harder and harder. They say the easy deposits have been found. I don't know if I necessarily buy into that. I think we just have to get smarter and do things a bit differently. There is definitely some truth to that. But coffee, which was discovered in 2010, was essentially discovered by good old-fashioned soil sampling, which is a basic tried and tested technique for finding gold deposits. So, is that an easy deposit to find? So I think we have to get creative on how we look and how we explore, and obviously newer technologies is going to make an impact. But the bottom line is these tier one assets that a lot of the top gold company mining companies talk about, Barrick and Newmont, for example, they're getting those ones are especially harder to find. So they're going to have to find new gold, and they've elected as of late to really focus on production and brownfields exploration. And the organic growth is they're looking to the explorers to do that. So I think that's going to make for a very exciting time in the junior mining sector, as exploration is back in vogue. And people kind of forgot about that over the last 10 years, where the majority of call it explorers, developers, and producers, they just focused on developed assets or ounces in the ground, if you will. And then on the, as far as the outlook, there's the threat of war, the safe haven, the storage of value. I think there's also a little bit of a shift happening with the younger people, the millennials, if you will, or even younger, where they're starting to perk their ears up to gold. And that really hasn't happened in quite some time. And the interest being is obviously, the devaluing of currencies, paper money, if you will, and physical gold is actually real. You can touch it, you can feel it. There's something to it. So I definitely think, obviously we no one wants war, but that's causing gold to obviously move up. But it's ultimately just the perception that it is a storage of wealth, and more people will be drawn to that. And there is something fascinating about gold versus paper money. So I do think, long story short, the supply and demand side is going to continue to grow, and I see, over the long term, gold continuing to rise because deposits getting harder to find. The majors need more ounces, and then on the flip side, paper money and the belief in it is just sort of decoupled, and it's going to continue to decouple more aggressively.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I think that you certainly have losing, slowly declining faith in fiat currencies, and there's no doubt that gold will be a fantastic place to park some of your assets just for the purposes of protection of wealth, not necessarily to grow it, but just to protect it. If you take that standpoint, I think you're going to set yourself up for success. Tony, is there any other metals you'd like to touch on that you'd like going forward?
Well, I see this, again, the supply and demand side theory can be applied to everything. Copper in particular, you can also apply the, our economies are growing. There are these niche metals, I don't know, those can get a little bit tricky from an investment perspective or my perspective. I mean, I stick to gold predominantly, but definitely copper, nickel is definitely something that's going to continue to grow here. Silver always has a need and a place. So, I try to take the path of least resistance, but I'm not totally an expert or spend a lot of time focusing on some of these, the lithium, the cobalt. There's a place for all of that, but that's not really my bailiwick, to be perfectly honest.
Very well. Well, tell us a little bit more about your success with Kaminak Gold. We know Goldcorp bought the company, and a matter of fact, over here at SmithWeekly Research, it was one of our first larger winners for us out of our recommendations in our investment newsletter called Venture Investor back, I want to say it was 2015, 2016 timeframe. Were there some failures along the way? What things, you were there the entire time, what things weren't working out so well, and how did you guys get that fixed?
Yeah. Actually, as it turned out, just to provide a bit of background, I was the longest standing employee from 2005 right through to the sale actually in 2016. So I saw it all. The failures, you know, I'm actually, we were kind of blessed. We did find, we executed other drill programs with partners, and we actually did, find gold or, find uranium in another drill play where they are sort of significant grades and widths, perhaps not, but, it was a first pass at that time. The only low point that's really jumping out at me right now was, in 2008, we had the subprime fiasco and the markets collapsed. All the markets collapsed, all the public markets. And, we were quite fortunate that we had $3 million in the bank at that time. And that provided us leverage in a pretty crappy market where most juniors were hand to mouth. They had less than $1 million in the bank. They were on care and maintenance. A lot of them went bankrupt, went under. So we were in a good position, but I don't want to call it a failure, but our mindset, it did get dragged down. It was a very taxing, depressing time. And at moments, it did seem a bit bleak that even though we had cash, we didn't really feel that we were all worried about the success of our company, but also the health of the industry, and rightfully so. I mean, I don't know. That's the only one that came up to mind as far as I would say our mindset was a little bit tattered and beaten up. And even though we had this little bit of a war chest at that time, it didn't really, the morale of the team was pretty dire. And we did bounce back fairly quickly in the sense that we just rolled up our sleeves. And I remember saying to our CEO at the time, we got to get back out there. There's opportunity around us, but our stock went from, I think at that time we had about a $60 million market cap, because we had this, there was a uranium asset in our company, and we were a prospect generator, so that created a bit of value, but that deteriorated right down to, we actually ended up being a $5 million company. Our share price went down to 6 cents. So when you have that much destruction of wealth, it's kind of hard to remain positive and say, okay, we're going to get out of this, because it's always harder to go up than to go down. So that was pretty grueling. That was the only sort of real failure I can identify. The rest of the years at Kaminak were really just, we had this roll your sleeves and, pardon my language here, but get shit done. And we persevered, and we just always stuck to our model and just kept our eyes and ears open. And we were quite fortunate that in 2009 is when we sat down. It was at the a conference called AME BC. Sorry, that's the organization. The conference is called Roundup, and it's actually happening next week. But we went to that conference as we usually do, and that's where we actually met a prospector by the name of Sean Ryan, and we were introduced to the Coffee Gold project, and the rest is history. But in 2009, we were able to secure that because we actually had $3 million in the bank, where a lot of juniors didn't. So that was one of the boxes that were ticked when Sean was looking to vend this project to a company. We could actually do work where most people couldn't, and we could also provide a cash payment.
Yeah, and Sean certainly is a solid guy to have around, and he's certainly doing a good job over at White Goldcorp. Let's move on. Let's talk about Tectonic. So this is a new company that's recently been listed on the TSXV. Give us a brief overview, Tony, and then I want to talk a few specifics.
Sure. The Tectonic was, Kaminak had the success. One of the best things that came out of Kaminak was the relationships that were formed with the people. Eira Thomas was the CEO, like I mentioned earlier, from 2013 to the sale in 2016. her and I became best friends through that process. And we really wanted to sort of keep the team together to some extent, but also, and just work together. And Tectonic was sort of the brainchild that came out of that with Rob Carpenter and another gentleman by the name of Kurt Freeman. We decided to move into Alaska, and Kurt is a resident of Alaska, but he's also a highly respected geologist and principal of Avalon Development, which is a mineral services company that provides services to mineral companies and mining companies. So it was pretty important to get him on board. Plus, he's just an awesome, outstanding individual and very smart technically. So Tectonic started as, let's get the Kaminak team back together. Let's also try to replicate the success of Tectonic, but let's actually build the company around a team. And so we did that, and then we also structured a business model, which was a little bit different than I think what most companies do. They usually find an asset and build a team around that. So we built a business model, and which essentially was targeting organic growth, as I mentioned earlier. Target discovery stage opportunities and manage risk. Our industry is 99% risk. So what we do at Tectonic is we try to de-risk projects right from the get-go. Even before we acquire them, we're de-risking them from an environmental perspective, a First Nation or Native perspective. We look at scale of the targets, or the property itself, the grade, what could the potential grade be here. So Tectonic had a team, a business model, and we decided to move into Alaska. That Alaska-Yukon border is just a political border. The Yukon was very crowded after the Goldcorp Kaminak acquisition, and Alaska was wide open. So we moved into that, and we were private for 2 years. We were self-funded for the first year, and then RCF and a few other notable mining individuals funded us for the second year. And then we decided to jump into the public space because we wanted to go drilling, and we felt it was the right time to expose our shareholders to a drill play, and B, more importantly, we felt the markets were starting to turn, where being public could be more creative than being private. So that decision was made last year, and we launched into the public space in November. And we also executed 2 drill programs, and we made 3 drill discoveries. And one of them, it happens to be near a mine called Pogo, which is a world-class high-grade gold mine. And now we're getting ready in 2020 to, with the intent of drilling actually 2 more projects this year.
Well, let's talk briefly before we get into the projects. I want to talk capital structure, talk about cash, debt, share structure, et cetera, and then also who are the key shareholders.
Definitely. Share structure, we have about 55 million shares outstanding. The team, the Tectonic team itself, owns about 38% of that. And so we're heavily, we're huge owners. We're heavily vested. We've also invested roughly $1.4 million into our company. And cash position as of our last published financial was 2.9 million. We've obviously spent a bit of that because we did execute a sort of a end of season drill program at our Northway project, so that's been depleted a little bit further. And as far as key shareholders are concerned, we have RCF, one of the largest resource funds in the world. We also have Sprott Asset Management, the fund that owns a good little chunk of the company. And then we have some high net worth individuals, some that, if you're familiar with Kaminak, we're on that shareholder registry. And we also have Sprott Securities down in San Diego, a few of the key brokers down there and their clients that own probably over 10%, around 10% of the company as well. So, and a couple funds out in Europe that are more boutique mining funds, if you will, that have taken an ownership in our company.
Okay, and Tony, where are you at as far as the shares that you own, and can you share with us the cost basis for those shares?
Definitely. I own roughly about 4 million shares of the company, and my cost base is around the 10-cent range, to be perfectly honest. I have participated all the way up to 35 cents, which was our last financing price. But when we started the company, there were earlier rounds that were the more bulky investments took place.
Can you speak a little bit more to the management team? Who's really key to being success critical?
I really do think it's a team approach, but I will highlight a few different individuals. When I say team, I really am actually encouraging myself and also my the people within our organization to sometimes we have to pause and pinch ourselves to the team we've actually established. It's quite phenomenal when you start at the board level right through to our senior geologist. And on the board level, we've been fortunate to have a gentleman by the name of Mel Benson. He's the longest serving director of Suncor Energy, which is Canada's largest oil and gas company. So we're talking about like an $80 billion company. He sits on that board, and he sits on Tectonic. So he's definitely overqualified, if you will, but we're very fortunate to have him. We also have a gentleman by the name of Michael Roper, or commonly referred to as Mick Roper, who works for Agnico Eagle Mining, one of the largest gold companies in the world. This is his first directorship. So again, we're honored that he would take a position with a junior, and his only directorship, to be perfectly honest, at this moment in time. And he manages Agnico's West Coast office, and he's a director of project evaluation. So those two people are and I mentioned Kurt earlier. He's another director, and the other director I wanted to mention as well is a lady by the name of Allison Rippon Armstrong, who was VP of Sustainability for Kaminak, and she has such a unique skill set. Not only is she a great person inside and out, but also she has this diverse background where she's actually an environmental biologist by trade. And I don't know too many juniors that actually have an environmental biologist on their board or on their team. And so she's also been involved in the permitting of 9 mines throughout northern Canada. So her skill set, and she's worked for the government, the federal government of Canada. She's worked directly with the First Nations, and she's worked with large scale mining companies. And now she's worked with Kaminak, and now she's working with us. So to have someone tick all those boxes, the lens that she looks at a project is very unique, and the skill and the knowledge that she passes down to us is phenomenal. And then on the management side, we have myself. And I also want to highlight our VPX, Eric Beitenhouse. He is he's one of the smartest geologists I've ever met. And the thing is, he's only 30 years old. He actually might be 31, but he's actually, he's a very young geologist. But he came out of university, Western University. He was a student. We hired him as a student at our coffee gold project while we were at Kaminak. He did his thesis on the Latte deposit, which is one of the deposits at Coffee. And we quickly saw something special in him. So he got his degree, and he went on to move up the ranks at Kaminak. Was part of making discoveries at Coffee. He was also part of orchestrating the initial mineral resource estimate, and then part of the feasibility study. And while Goldcorp acquired Kaminak, they actually elected to keep a couple individuals from Kaminak, and Eric was one of them. And it was, they saw something immediately in him as well. And he started moving up the ranks at Goldcorp, so to speak. He was literally en route or about to leave for Argentina, but he was going to operate a $25 million program there. And I approached him out of the blue, and I said, I would like to have lunch with you. and he left Goldcorp, his cushy job, and decided to join Tectonic. And he's a shining star in our industry that not too many people know about. And he just keeps getting smarter and better each and every year with the more knowledge he obtains, and his passion and enthusiasm for the mineral space and for discovery is phenomenal. So there are definitely others on our team that are worth mentioning, but that's kind of the, just to keep it short and succinct. But those are the few people I wanted to highlight for today's discussion. I can talk further about the other team if you want, no problem.
No, and you certainly mentioned Rob and Eira before, and appreciate you sharing that information, more information on the management team, and sounds like a pretty good group that you've put together, Tony. Well, let's talk key projects, and what can we expect from the company on those projects in 2020, and where is the focus going to be?
Okay, so we're, obviously we're at the start of the year, and budgets and capitals being reviewed, and how we want to move forward. At the end of the day, we have a drill discovery that is quite significant at our Tibbs project, which is the one near Pogo that I mentioned earlier. And the drill discovery intercept was 6 grams, roughly 6 grams over 29 meters. And we're seeing potential along strike and also at depth where we can expand that discovery. So that's going to be a very much a focus for 2020. And we also have another project by the name of 70 Mile that is a 40-kilometer long gold belt, greenstone belt that's been sitting dormant for 20 years up until about a year and a half ago when we acquired it. We went in there with a different model, if you will, geological model, and we're finding gold where we expect it to be. And we have now delineated probably, there's no shortage of targets on this property. It's 150,000 acres, 40 kilometers long. There's gold and silver anomalies everywhere, but we vectored in onto roughly about 8 to 10 zones, and we are excited to get a drill on that property and basically do what we did at Tibbs, blitz a bunch of zones, try to find the center of gravity, and make a drill discovery. And we, our excitement for both those two projects is extremely high, because we think the potential is very real and can be transformative for our company.
And what's the time frame like, Tony? Can you give us a little bit more information on when folks can expect the next drilling program and when those results will come out?
We're probably thinking around June. June's always an ideal time. You kind of want to get up there initially, and we might want to do a bit of work prior to that, but probably execute our first drill program either the end of May, somewhere in June, and then results would follow depending on lab situation 2 to 4 weeks after that.
And who's handling the drilling work for Tectonic, Tony?
Last year we used them, and this year as well. We use a company by the name of Ground Truth, which is a Yukon-based company that's done a lot of work for us at Kaminak back in the day, and they're also done the work at White Gold, if you're not familiar with who they are. Great team. They come out of the Sean Ryan School of Exploration, if you will, and they have this track-mounted RAB drill that we've actually brought into Alaska last year. We were the first company to actually we're the first company to utilize them in Alaska, if I'm not mistaken. But we're also the first company in quite some time to actually utilize a RAB drill. So this applies to some of our business model and our exploration strategy of how to do things effectively. And the RAB drill is quite it's not necessarily a unique tool, but it gets, I call it a scout drill. When you're blessed with a lot of targets, I think some of the mistakes that some of the juniors make is that they go in there with say a diamond drill, and depending where you're situated, obviously diamond drills down south are much cheaper to operate than in the north, mainly due to logistics and infrastructure. But you don't want to get fit. I personally don't. When you have a lot of targets, you want to find which target has the best potential for scale and grade. And sometimes, instead of getting fixated on one target, we essentially want to try to make multiple discoveries and test multiple zones, and then step back and assess, okay, which zone has the best potential for scale and grade, and then follow that up the following year with perhaps a diamond drill, which is the most costlier, but ultimately it's the best tool for obtaining geological information and sometimes testing down at depth as well.
Yeah, certainly Ground Truth's a good team. I think you made a good choice there, and they're doing a great job over at White Gold, and I suspect they'll be doing the same for you. Can you speak to local jurisdictions that you're dealing with on the properties as far as federal, state, and tribe lands? And then also, what is the status of the relations with the native corporations?
Definitely. So we have 3 projects in Alaska. The Tibbs project is situated on state land, and it's within the Goodpaster mining district, and which is host to the Pogo mine. So, from locally, it's very much straightforward, if you will. The other 2 projects, we've, as part of our business model, managing risk and assessing opportunities, we've actually partnered up with a $1 billion Alaska Native corporation. And the way the land tenure works in Alaska, there's federal land, there's state land, and you called it tribe land. I call it native, or in Alaska it's referred to as native land. And each one has its own sort of a, if I were to rank them accordingly, providing that the native corporation is pro-business, pro-mining, native land can be quite simply the superior land to operate on. It's sort of fee simple. You deal directly with the native corporation on many fronts. There is sometimes other regulatory involvement, but for the most part, you're dealing directly with them. And when 2 people are aligned for a common goal, or 2 organizations are aligned for a common goal, and in our case with Doyon, it's to find a mine. And so they're very much supportive of that initiative, and so are us, and so are we. And that makes for a great partnership. And when we approach them, they are, as I mentioned before, they're a huge economic driver in the state of Alaska. So they swing a big stick. They are also the largest landholder in the state of Alaska. So there's tracts of land from a geological perspective that we've identified that could be highly opportunistic for finding a mine. So when we approached them, we introduced ourselves, and it resonated, and there was a willingness to work together from both parties. And we elected and pushed for, and then we ended up signing a lease agreement that is actually a production agreement. So although these assets are early stage, we have de-risked them with production agreements. And what that allows us to do is really focus most of our time and energy on finding a mine. Whereas in state land or in parts of Canada, you don't typically get a production agreement, and there's more negotiations, more hurdles to jump through from a regulatory perspective. So a lot of that is taken care of at the onset, and we think that's a huge win for both of us, and it's been a true pleasure actually working with them.
Well, speak to the goals of management with this company, Tony. What is the end game? Are you going to follow the Kaminak model exactly? What is the target size as far as asset size you're looking for? You guys want to find another mine or find something that could potentially be a mine. What is your time frame, and is the ultimate goal a buyout?
Well, the ultimate goal is to create value for shareholders, and that's sometimes a generic term that gets thrown around a lot in our space. But if you visited our presentation or our website, we call it transformational wealth. So how is that? How we, now that we've identified that, we can't lose focus. We're here to, ultimately, what that means is we're here to make money for our shareholders. We have to always put the shareholders first because they're the owners in the company, and obviously we work for them. And the best way that we're going to do that is by making a discovery and when I say discovery, there's different sort of levels of discovery. I mentioned earlier the tier 1 assets. For us, we don't focus on small things. We like to play big. Large scale gold systems, gold deposits, mineral deposits. We need size. Our industry needs size, and the majors don't really care about size. And size solves a lot of issues. Then the next thing we look at, or in tandem, I should say, is grade. Grade solves a lot of problems. Grade is king. We've heard that over and over again. Ultimately, we're looking for high margin ounces, and something 5 million ounce plus is the realm or the lens that we look at when we're assessing these opportunities, and we want to see high grade or high margin ounces. So scale, grade, create transformational wealth for our shareholders is really the name of the game.
That sounds good, and I certainly agree with you that that's a good way to go. And if you can help the local folks there by bringing in jobs and bringing in work, whether it's advancing to a mine decision or exploration work, support, etc., is fantastic. And over here, I like to say that management is king. Perhaps grade is queen, but certainly management to me is king. Well, Tony, how about a U.S. OTC listing? Now, I noticed you guys aren't listed on the U.S. OTC yet. When will that occur, and will you guys go for a QB or QX listing?
I think definitely we will at some point. I guess last year was a pretty intense year. 4 exploration programs we executed, including 2 drill programs. We raised 5.8 million, and we ended up, and we took Tectonic public. So we really wanted to get on the venture like ASAP. And now that that's done with, then we will be turning our attention towards perhaps an additional U.S. listing. It's very beneficial. So it's just a matter of time till we actually go down that path. And we definitely want to expose ourselves to more shareholders. We're just coming up for air, so definitely something that we're going to address probably going forward in the future here.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, a US OTC basic listing is pretty simple from my understanding, and plus you guys are in Alaska, so it would help for the US investors who maybe aren't as sophisticated to get into the Canadian exchanges, but use maybe kind of a run-of-the-mill broker in the US that may not allow access to Canada. US OTC is a good way to go. Tony, for potential investors who are listening, why should they take a hard look at Tectonic at current price levels?
Thank you for that question. So start off at the price level, we're actually trading slightly below the last 2 financing prices. So we financed at 35 cents in 2019, and then again at 35 cents in 2018. Those are the only 2 outsider financings we've done within the company, so right now we're slightly below that. So from an entry point, it's a great time to look at the stock, because you'd actually be cheaper than a lot of those funds and shareholders that I mentioned earlier, and there's no one that's going to be hitting you up with 10 cent or 15 cent paper, because management and the insiders are all escrowed, plus we have no intention of selling. So it's always good to get in at the bottom. The other reason why one should look at Tectonic is that I think we're going to have a remarkable year this year. There's not too many opportunities where, as a management team or even as an investor, we can step up to a drill discovery of 6 grams over 29 meters, and the company will step out a long strike and see just how big that is. That drill discovery was literally 1 fence of holes in a kilometer-long corridor. So we're literally just scratching the surface there. They will also get exposure to another drill program at 70 Mile. And the other thing that they're going to get exposure to is a business model and a team that operates with integrity and honesty and transparency. We pride ourselves on our core values and how we communicate and how we operate this company. They also have exposure to a team that I think is the top quartile in the space. I mentioned those people earlier. We have a very diverse team, from mining individuals to oil and gas individuals to environmental biologists to also Eira Thomas and Rob Carpenter, who are part of our advisory team and also founders of this company. They are soon to be Hall of Famers, if you will, in our space. Eira's done tremendous things on every front you can imaginable within the exploration and mining space. She definitely is a legend. So having access to those people, that talent, I think, as you mentioned, the management team is king. So, those are some of the attributes why I think sets us apart from a lot of the other companies out there. Plus, our share structure is extremely tight. Management is heavily vested. We own a lot. Tight share structure. We got a bit of cash in the bank as well, and we have a really solid shareholder base. And we're just literally starting. We went public in November here, so we're literally just getting our feet wet here, and the car is going to be going into 5th gear here very soon.
And how can the audience reach out and learn more about Tectonic?
Yeah, I think that the best way is to obviously we accept phone calls any time of day there, but our email is info@tectonicmetals.com. Reaching out through that way through the website, which is www.tectonicmetals.com. Email, web, phone. We also have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, so those are other avenues to connect with us. And we are attending the 2 conferences coming up here, and all the standard conferences. If somebody wants to reach out on that front. We're based in Vancouver, is where our office is, but we do travel quite extensively as well, so we can always come out. If you get on our email list, you'll know where we're traveling to, and we can hopefully connect to one of those avenues.
Well, Tony, we really appreciate you coming on to talk about Tectonic, and good luck in 2020.
Thank you, Andrew, for the opportunity to share a bit about me and about our company and our team with you, and all the best to you as well in 2020.